In 1996, tens of millions of people sat down at a computer, opened Microsoft Word, and met a cartoon paperclip with enormous eyes and a single relentless question. Type the word dear, followed by a name, and he would appear from nowhere. It looks like you're writing a letter. Would you like help with that? His official name was Clippy. Almost nobody called him that. He was Clippy, and for the next decade, he became one of the most reviled pieces of software ever shipped by a major company. Time magazine later put him on a list of the 50 worst inventions in history, next to the Segway and New Coke. Smithsonian magazine called him one of the worst software design blunders in the history of computing. People inside Microsoft were mocking the character before it ever reached a single customer. And yet Clippy wasn't an accident, and he wasn't poorly conceived. He was the direct output of real academic research, a genuine design process, and a company that believed it had solved a real problem. Understanding why he failed, and failed so completely that Microsoft spent years publicly killing him off, means starting before Office 97 even existed, inside a cartoon house Microsoft built 2 years earlier and then abandoned. In 1995, Microsoft released a product called Bob. It was Bill Gates' personal pet project, designed to make home computers less intimidating for people who found menus and command lines confusing. Instead of folders and file paths, Bob turned your desktop into a cartoon house. Want to write a letter? Click the pencil and paper. Want to check your bank balance? Click the checkbook on the desk. The idea wasn't random decoration. It was built on real research from 2 Stanford professors, Clifford Nass and Byron Reeves, who studied how people respond to computers socially. Their core finding was that people unconsciously treat computers the way they treat other people, reacting to a machine's personality, tone, and behavior as if it belonged to another human being, even when they know intellectually that it's just software. Bob was built to exploit that instinct on purpose. Give the computer a face, and people will trust it faster. Bob's project manager was Melinda French, who would later marry Bill Gates. And Bob flopped almost immediately, pulled from the market within about a year, having sold roughly 58,000 copies against Microsoft's internal hopes for millions. The reasons were practical as much as anything. It demanded more computing power than most home PCs of 1995 could offer. It cost about $100 on top of Windows itself, and reviewers found the cartoon house condescending rather than charming for an adult user. Its own animated guide characters were already drawing the same complaint that would later define Clippy: intrusive, distracting, hard to get away from. And months after launch, Windows 95 arrived with a genuinely improved standard interface, making the entire premise of Bob largely unnecessary. But the underlying idea didn't die with it, and neither did the technology behind Bob's animated characters. Microsoft took that character engine and moved it into a much bigger, much more used piece of software: Office. That's the pivot that made Clippy possible. A failed home computing experiment donated its DNA to the most widely used productivity suite on the planet. The character work fell to an illustrator named Kevin Atterbury, hired by Microsoft in 1996. Over the following months, Atterbury contributed somewhere around 15 to 20 designs out of roughly 250 candidates being considered for the new Office Assistant feature. Rejected ideas included a stapler, a coffee cup, and a pencil. Atterbury has said the paperclip idea appealed to him because of how much he could do with the shape. Bend it, animate it, give it personality, while keeping the design simple enough that the eyes could carry almost all of the emotional weight. That wasn't an accident either. It echoed the same Nass and Reeves thinking behind Bob. Eyes signal trust to a human brain, so eyes were where the design effort concentrated. And by the numbers, it worked. In Stanford-run focus group testing, Clippy tested as the most trusted, most engaging, most endearing character out of the entire lineup. Ahead of the other characters launched alongside him in Office 97, including an animated cat named Scribble and a caricature of William Shakespeare. On paper, Microsoft had picked a winner. But inside those same focus groups, there was a smaller, less comfortable signal that got less attention. Some test subjects, notably some of the women in the study groups, read Clippy as distinctly male and found his constant, direct eye contact unsettling rather than charming. The same big, expressive eyes that tested well for warmth also tested, for some users, as intrusive. Nobody killed the project over that finding. It shipped anyway, built into Office 97, turned on by default for every user. To understand why that early warning sign turned into a decade of user frustration, you have to look at what Clippy actually was, mechanically, underneath the animation. Clippy ran on a system that watched what you typed and compared it against a set of triggers, patterns like the word dear followed by a name, and then pulled a matching tip from Office's help documentation. Later versions used something called Microsoft Agent, running on Bayesian probability calculations to guess which help topic you probably wanted. But at its core, the system had no model of what you were actually trying to accomplish. It matched surface patterns to canned responses. That's a subtle distinction, but it's the entire story. If you typed "Dear" because you were writing a formal business letter, a eulogy, a breakup note, or a grocery list with a friend's name on it as a joke, Clippy offered you the exact same interruption every time. He wasn't reading your intent. He was reading a key word. And because he had no memory of your preferences and no way to learn that you'd already dismissed that same suggestion 50 times before, he kept asking. That's the mechanical root of the backlash. An assistant that interrupts constantly, offers help that doesn't fit your actual situation, and shows no sign of learning from being told no. By 1998, within about 2 years of launch, the backlash inside and outside Microsoft was loud enough that the company went looking for a fix. And the person they asked was Clifford Nass, the same Stanford researcher whose original work on computers as social actors had justified giving Office a cartoon face in the first place. Nass's diagnosis, which he later published in his book, The Man Who Lied to His Laptop, traced the problem straight back to his own research. If people unconsciously treat a computer character the way they treat a person, then that character is held to the same social standards as a person. And by that standard, Clippy was a disaster. He never learned your name. He never adapted to your preferences. He showed no interest whatsoever in getting to know you, conversation after conversation, year after year. Treat any human being that way, endlessly present, endlessly unbothered by your annoyance, endlessly incurious about who you are, and you'd find them off-putting too. Nass's proposed fix leaned into the same social logic. He proposed a version where, if a user rated Clippy's advice unhelpful, the assistant would encourage them to send a complaint directly to Microsoft's support team, essentially giving users a shared enemy to bond against, a scapegoat, the same trick people instinctively use to build rapport with a stranger. It was a strange, almost anthropological idea for a piece of Office software, and Microsoft never moved forward with it. Instead, the company chose a slower, more public form of damage control. In 2001, with the release of Office XP, Microsoft shipped the Office Assistant switched off by default for the first time. Still available if you wanted it, but no longer forced on new users, and ran an ad campaign in which Clippy was comically fired, voiced by comedian Gilbert Gottfried, alongside a small game letting frustrated users shoot back at him with office supplies. With the release of Office 2007, the feature was removed from the product entirely. It has never come back as a default feature since. Clippy never actually disappeared. An April Fool's joke in 2014, when Office Online briefly brought him back as a working assistant. a hidden Easter egg inside Cortana that same year on Windows Phone, a browser extension in 2017 that let him pop up on any website you visited. In 2021, Microsoft ran a public poll promising to bring him back as an emoji if enough people voted for it, which they did, and Clippy stickers shipped inside Microsoft Teams not long after. Then, in August 2025, he took on a role nobody at Microsoft could have planned for. YouTuber Louis Rossmann urged viewers to switch their profile pictures to Clippy as a protest against companies harvesting user data to train AI systems without consent. A mascot built to make software feel trustworthy had become shorthand for exactly the opposite. His more consequential legacy, though, is as a warning label. When Microsoft rolled out Copilot, its generative AI assistant built into Office and Windows, the comparison to Clippy came fast. Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff said in late 2024 that Copilot was basically the new Microsoft Clippy, claiming customers weren't getting value from it. Microsoft pushed back publicly. Charles Lamanna, one of the executives leading the Copilot effort, disputed Benioff's claim directly, pointing to internal case studies and saying hundreds of thousands of Microsoft's own employees were actively using the tool. But the exchange itself is telling, regardless of who was right. For Copilot, Clippy wasn't a nostalgic reference. It was the exact failure Microsoft could least afford to repeat. The redesign shows in the details. Copilot is built to be summoned rather than to interrupt uninvited, and to improve from how people actually use it rather than run on fixed keyword triggers. A direct answer to the two things that made Clippy unbearable. That comparison holds up better than it might seem. NASA's 1998 diagnosis reads almost like a design brief for what came after. Where Clippy matched keywords, today's assistants are built to infer what you actually mean from full context. Where Clippy forgot you the moment you closed the document, memory and personalization are now treated as core features, not afterthoughts. A direct answer to a system that showed no interest in learning who you were. And where Clippy interrupted on a fixed trigger no matter what you were doing, modern assistants are designed to wait, or to learn over time when help is actually welcome. None of that guarantees today's AI assistants have solved the problem for good. The comparisons to Clippy that followed Copilot's rollout exist precisely because plenty of users still feel talked at rather than understood by their software. But the diagnosis is no longer a mystery. Microsoft built Clippy on a real and reasonable theory. Give a computer a face, and people will trust it. What that theory left out, and what the outside researcher behind it had to be called back in to explain, turning his own research against the very product it had inspired, is that a face without memory, without adaptation, without any real model of the person on the other side of the screen, doesn't earn trust. It earns exactly what any person would earn, behaving the same way: irritation, and eventually, contempt. The paperclip is gone. The question it raised, whether software can earn trust without understanding the person using it, is still open. And today's AI assistants are the ones being asked to answer it. This channel is about systems. The ones that were built decades ago and still run everything. The ones being built right now that nobody is watching closely enough. We will cover them, one at a time, the same way we covered this one. Thank you for watching.